Answering my comments while doodling, Part 12, starring Biglundi. The illustration in this video is a continuation from Part 1. See it on my Bills About channel if you're so inclined. But we have a whole new sacrificial lamb in Biglundi. Let's go. The following comments appeared on the page of a video I did called A Quickie on my Skype debate with Biglundi. Biglundi. And you end with a tu quoque fallacy. Really for you, my boy. Especially since the only ones who have been arguably mean to you at all were myself and CD. But oh no, Bill's gotta pay too, right? Whatever. What Biglundi is referring to here is the fact that he and another piece of scum by the name CardinalVirtues came to my channel and began insulting, deriding, and threatening me over a comment that Biglundi and CardinalVirtues mistakenly thought was an insult aimed at another of their buddies, Theowarner. I explained to them what my comment actually said and told them that I would reword it so that not even they could misunderstand it, even after they informed me that they now knew what I actually said and meant. That was not good enough for them or Theowarner. They all continued to insult, deride, threaten, and began to post lie upon lie about me to others, to get others to join them in their attacks. This pissed me off and prompted me to inform them that I wasn't rewording a damn thing and that I was going to start giving them all a reason to do what they were doing. That prompted Biglundi, better known in the community now, thanks to me, as Mr. Miss, because he diligently misses anything I ever tell him, to post his above comment. And you end with a tu quoque fallacy. My context. Ask Biglundi the following. Tu quoque. Personal edification. What interplay are you calling a tu quoque fallacy? The end of the video where he declares he won't change the titles of his videos that hurt our feelings because we hurt his feelings. You know, it's not an ad hominem tu quoque fallacy. Like, you're a hypocrite so you're wrong. It's just our regular tu quoque fallacy. Like, it's okay for me to do it because X persons did it. To better formulate it, it would be similar to the Romans had slaves, therefore it is okay for us to own slaves. Thanks. I hadn't taken it as an argument, but as an act of retribution, purely emotional. As for he and CV being the only ones that were arguably mean to me, I informed Biglundi. Theo called me stupid, dumb, and in the comments of one of my most recent videos, stupid again, where have you been? Oh, that's right, you miss everything. Biglundi, Mr. Miss, misquoting me. So humans can't know things unless a God exists, and misquote. Did you just agree with Eric Hovind? That's right, you miss everything. Like I said, humans can't know a God exists unless it exists. You'll of course miss that too, but that's good old you. It was Biglundi, CardinalVirtues, and Theowarner's contention that gods are unfalsifiable, that knowledge doesn't exist. To drive this point home, Biglundi told me, to say that you know something is as ridiculous as to doubt that which you know. I told Biglundi, them, that if 1 + 1 = 2 cannot be proven to be true, to be known, then that would make 1 + 1 = 2 unfalsifiable. I told them that the truth of the equation 1 + 1 = 2 is known, and so likewise, the existence of God is not unfalsifiable. That if God exists, humans can know. That gave us Biglundi's, Mr. Mrs. stupefyingly moronic comeback. You see, Mr. Miss, fool. If God is unfalsifiable, then you would not exist, because truth would not exist. Hence, it would not be true that it is true that anything exists. Thus, nothing would. We now move on to the comments from my video, Anti-Intellectualism Lives in Barnes & Noble. Did you have to make the anti-intellectual Theo? The comments of my videos, I would say something is X, and Theowarner would tell me it is not X, that I am wrong. I would ask Theowarner what X is then. Theowarner would tell me that this isn't about his beliefs, so stop asking him what his beliefs are because he doesn't discuss his beliefs with anyone. What is X is something you all may be wondering. I told Theowarner that X is the Westboro Baptists, the Roman Catholics, Mormons, Eastern Orthodox, and all the rest. Theowarner told me that they are not X because he is X. I asked Theowarner what he is. Theowarner told me this isn't about his beliefs, so stop asking him what his beliefs are, because he doesn't discuss his beliefs. Theo said the only reason you atheists ask me what my beliefs are is so that you can shit on my beliefs, and I'm guessing that's what you're doing. Theo told me that as long as I start referring to them as X, that he and I would no longer have a problem. This, of course, made me ask again, what is X? Theo again retreated to, this isn't about his beliefs. That all he wants to do is engage me in an intellectual conversation about X, that he, Theo, just likes to converse about X. I told Theo, how can we converse about X if I don't know what we're talking about? His reply, you know very well we are talking about X. You want to talk about it, and it's my favorite thing to do. So let's talk about it. All I want you to know is that X isn't the Westboro Baptists, the Roman Catholics, Mormons, Eastern Orthodox, and all the rest, and that I would love to talk to you about them. I told Theo no, that all I want him to do is talk about X. Theo responded with, this isn't about my beliefs, this is about X. Theo went on to say that the fact that you, Beelzebub, only want to talk about X and not them proves nothing but that you are anti-intellectual. That encouraged me to make my video, Anti-Intellectualism, Vision Burns Noble. That prompted Biglundi's comeback. Did you have to make the anti-intellectual Theo? I mean, you made a turnaround on the concept of taking philosophy seriously. This was in no small part due to your conversation with Theo and the comments on the video. And you do this to Theo? In my Skype debate with Theowarner, he was going on and on about the beauty of philosophy, as Mr. and Mrs. want to do. I mentioned that I had taken a couple philosophy electives in school to Theowarner, and that I didn't read any of the books because they were boring as hell. Many would read comments on my video pages informing me of how smart I am, but that my problem is that I am just inarticulate. In other words, I am not familiar with philosophy speak language, and that this inhibits my points getting across at times. I put out the word that if anyone had any book suggestions so that I could bone up my articulation, to please leave them in the comments. Many folk did. You made a turnaround on the concept of taking philosophy seriously. This was in no small part due to your conversation with Theo and the comments on the video. And you do this to Theo? I mean, you could have had yourself and Theo against an anti-intellectual. That would have been better. I learned everything I took from this from the comments. Theo got nothing he didn't work hard for. As an honest type, I like to pay people for their work. The only thing I learned from Theo is that he is dishonest to the core of his mind. If anyone disagrees with that characterization, well, I talked to the guy. Yeah, and I listened twice. And from what I saw, it was just instance after instance of you not understanding at all what Theo had to say on anything. Or you have to give an example of something Theo said that I didn't answer. Or you never talked about what is intrinsically bad about superstition, for instance. You kept giving things that superstition causes as being bad, without ever explaining why superstition itself is bad. You would also make silly points, completely not understanding what Theo would say, saying that Theo was saying a tree and a bush are the same thing, that he was arguing about the definition of the word definition. I mean, you really sucked in that entire discussion. You even said you refuse to consider those that don't accept the Trinity as Christians. I mean, holy shit. I did answer all of these. I said superstition is bad because it is a negative. Clarifications. Biglundi asserted that I stated in my debate with Theowarner that superstition is bad because it is a negative. I informed him that although I didn't say that it was nonetheless true. I informed Theowarner after he suggested that you can get a positive from a negative, positive effects from superstition. That you can't because they are false. He said, so what? I told him that falsehood is a negative. I informed Biglundi that being a negative, false, makes it a bad answer to any question, as 1 + 1 = 5 is bad. But Biglundi couldn't understand, so here we are again. I did answer all of these. I said superstition is bad because it is a negative. It isn't true. I gave the example of global warming. I gave how superstition, stops human evolution dead in its tracks. I said a bus can't be a car because it's not a car. If I ask him to pick me up in a car and that's the same as a bus, in his world, anything can be a car or a chair. I could be waiting all day for him to pick me up in his cupcake because Theo stated that a bus can be a car to demonstrate that the Christians can claim God is both triune and not triune. He was arguing about the definition of the word definition. You being you simply missed it. It was Theo's argument that both the triune and non-triune Christians are Christian, that the definition of the word triune details that both states are one. Thus he is claiming that the definition of the word definition is that all things have the same definition. This is Biglundi believing he is quoting me. You even said you refuse to consider those that don't accept the Trinity as Christians. End of Biglundi's false quote. This you pulled out your ass. Oh, pulled out my ass, did I? Minute 37 of the video Theo put up. He's explaining that if you define Christianity as belief in a triune God, then you'd be excluding some of those that consider themselves Christians. You then scoff and say, that doesn't wash with me. Christianity doesn't exist. I'm not excluding anyone. The aim of my discussion was to discover how some Christians are Baptists and some are Catholic, but they are all Christians. That is what does not wash with me. They will call each other heretics if they are all Christians when they want their beliefs in science class. All our Christians call other sects heretics, Billsy. Don't you know that by now? Don't you know by now that that has nothing to do with the point? You see, Biglundi boy, God is either triune or not triune. If the God is triune, then the God itself is excluding those that assert it is not triune. Capiche? Don't you know by now that that has nothing to do with the point? Yes, it does, because Christians can disagree as to the details of the dogmas without their religion not existing. And you keep saying that Christians call each other heretics. I don't even know the last Christian to ever call another Christian a heretic. Talk to Gandalf and Yusuf Al-Tahir if you want to hear a Christian call another a heretic. The details are my point, nothing else. The details don't match, but they all call themselves Christians. That does not wash with me. If the details don't match, then they're not all Christians. If they are, then Christianity is anything anyone says it is and does not exist as an entity. I can call it cupcake Christianity. I'm done trying to explain this one. We're both food eaters, but define edible food differently. But we're still food eaters. I'm a vegan. I'm guessing you're a meat eater. I don't consider meat eating food, but you can still call both of us food eaters, correct? Therefore, that argument is silly. No, we both know food exists because we both eat it regardless of what we define it as. If there's only one food we are supposed to eat, and I don't know what it is, and two guys come to me with what food is and how I'm supposed to eat it, and they don't agree on that, then neither of them knows what the food actually is they're talking about. But they both say they believe the same food exists. So who do I believe? And eat what they want me to eat? Here, Biglundi is attempting to create an analogy. Unfortunately for him, he neither knows the definition of the word, nor how to create one. I will define an analogy for you now, Biglundi, and teach you how to assign one. In an analogy, you are replacing the nouns of the thing you are analogizing with nouns of equivalent value. In my debates with Theowarner, the professed English teacher, I told Theo, if the God tells you it is triune, then it is triune. Thus, interpreting Christianity is an invalid practice. I told Theo that if the God is omniscient and omnipotent, that this religious confusion would not exist, because God would have the power to get across what it wants you to know, that it is triune. Therefore, anyone that claims God is not triune, a contradiction of the God's own decree, is not practicing Christianity. They are not Christians. They are literally inventing the God that they say invented them. This dictates that the God does not exist. Theo, the professed English teacher, like Biglundi, tried his failed attempt at analogy. Theo informed me that just because politicians disagree over what Obama said, the Christian texts, does not mean that Obama doesn't exist. You can replace Obama with Biglundi's food. Theo went on to say that that means you can interpret Christianity. And all the contradictory versions, denominations are all Christianity. Because as politicians disagree if what Obama says is true, they are still all practicing politics, Christianity. Now we all know that Obama exists. I will now teach you, Biglundi, how to assign your analogy. You too, English teacher. The food delivered us a book. In its book, the food has declared that it is an omniscient and omnipotent being. The food has decreed that meat eating is not food. Two people that are both food eaters come along. One states that the food has decreed that meat eating is not food, therefore you cannot eat meat. The second states that you are wrong. What the food meant is that you can eat meat, but just don't put it in the same category as food. Both food eaters agree, at least, that the food is omniscient and omnipotent. What the two food eaters can't grasp is that omniscience and omnipotence dictates that this food would have no problem spelling out what it wants to them, and that their confusion would not exist. I can give Theowarner a bit of credit. After having to have this explained to him multiple times and in multiple ways, he finally conceded that yes, my argument does disprove the existence of a God, just not his God. He informed me that God isn't omniscient and omnipotent. He stated that God is maximally potent, which demonstrates his God doesn't exist because he just created the God on the spot. Yes, even after I told him 1,000,000,001 times, you can't make stuff up. Or, as Theo would put it, spew ad hoc trash. The bunch of incoherent fucktardry you are about to witness from Biglundi now stems from an exchange of comments between Theowarner and myself in our Skype debate. In that debate, Theowarner asked me what was bad about superstition when I told him I was out to destroy it. I told him that it is bad because it retards mankind. Theo asked how. I gave an example using global warming. I told him that I have heard Christians say that global warming does not exist because God said he would not destroy the world again, as in Noah's flood. Theowarner conceded that yes, superstition is bad in that that sense, but that does not make superstition intrinsically bad. If you want to give a substantial reason for why superstition should be destroyed, then you have to consistently show that superstition is bad for the individual and not what effect superstition has on the world as a whole. Your global warming analogy does not state that superstitions are intrinsically bad. I told Theowarner that a person's personal superstition retards them because it stops them from exploring, investigating, and from evolving. Theowarner conceded that yes, superstition is intrinsically bad. Theowarner went on to say that although superstition is intrinsically bad, some superstitions have positive effects upon the world. I told Theo it is impossible for a superstition to have positive effects on the world because superstitions are a negative. It is impossible to get a positive from a negative. I told Theo that what he refers to as positive superstitious effects are simply the superstitious projecting what they want onto their superstition, because a unicorn has never told anyone to help an old lady across the street. Incapable of grasping this exchange, Biglundi came armed with, you said that superstitions are bad because they are a negative. Let's roll from there. Superstition is bad because it's a negative, so it's a tautology. Superstition is bad because it is bad. I mean, come on, Billsy, that's silly. A bus isn't a car because it's not a car. Another useless tautology. Superstition is bad because it is a negative. A bus isn't a car because it's not a car. But this is the best you've got. What Biglundi is referring to here is what I told Theowarner in our Skype debate. After Theowarner told me that Christians stating that God is triune and those stating he is not are all still worshiping the same God because God is both those things. I told Theowarner that that is impossible. To prove it, Theowarner told me that a bus and a car are the same thing because a bus is his car, and that I, Beelzebub, must accept it as a car because according to me, Theowarner, it is. Theo went on to tell me that I am stupid and dumb because I didn't know that, and that he would continue to call me stupid and dumb if I continued to disagree, because that would simply prove that I am. To prove I am stupid, Theo went on to inform us that if you don't know what blood is, you will still know the applications of blood, that yes and no do not mean yes and no, and his coup de grace, that rocks are food. I promptly told Theowarner a bus is not a car. It is a bus. God is not both triune and not triune. Unable to comprehend, inhabit anything but the sheer depths of idiocy. Biglundi informed me that I was silly by creating the tautology, a bus isn't a car because it's not a car. Billsy, have you any idea what a tautology is? It's similar to circular reasoning, but worse, and that's what you're doing here by simply defining a bus as not a car and defining superstition as negative. You're not giving an argument, you're just making up useless tautologies. In what way are you using the word bad? I'm curious. I don't even know how you're using the word bad, but it seems you've defined negative to mean bad, so I simplified your statement. In other words, superstition is a negative. What's a negative? Bad. So superstition is bad. Brilliant. He's one to talk. Now that we know this comical buffoon is just beating off his brain and coming up dry, I decided to enlighten him as to the difference between the word negative and the words a negative, and what I mean when I use the word bad. I see bad things are bad for people. Peeing on the sidewalk in some countries is bad. It's a negative. Superstition is a negative in the sense it doesn't exist. Is it bad for people? Yes. It stops thinking. Is it bad in the sense it causes harm to a person? Yes. That evolution thing. Is it bad in the sense it harms people other than the superstitious? Yes, global warming denial by Christians. An innocuous superstition is still bad. A unicorn in your furnace that wants you to do things. You see, Mr. Miss, we can illuminate a negative by contrast with a positive. A negative is a thing that does not exist, and a positive is a thing that does exist. Superstition is a negative in the sense it doesn't exist. Are you even aware you're declaring the characters in all anime a negative, or cartoons, or any other fiction? Well aware I am not, Mr. Miss. Are you aware of what a negative is? How about a positive? And the rest are just possible things that believing in superstition may or may not do to people. They have nothing to do with superstition being intrinsically bad. Evidently, global warming denial isn't bad, and more evidently, in Biglundi's world, a bad thing is not intrinsically bad, it's just bad. Or in other words, Mr. Miss, you would see something you think is pretty. You would then see something you believe is prettier. You, of course, would call that intrinsically pretty to claim your previous observation isn't. Or how about this? You would ask what is sentience. I would tell you the ability to ask what is sentience. You would tell me that is not sentience, that only demonstrates sentience. I would tell you that is the equivalent of saying an egg is not an egg, but demonstrates an egg. you would call me the dumbest person you believe you have ever met, and it would then be my duty to show you what I do to intrinsically trash bitches. Are you even aware you're declaring the characters in all anime a negative, or cartoons, or any other fiction? Do you believe the characters in anime exist? The cartoon characters are a negative in that you can't shake Mickey Mouse's hand because he does not exist. Are cartoon characters superstition? Is that what you're saying? Mr. Miss, fiction is not superstition. Star Wars isn't considered real by anyone but you, apparently. Fiction is a negative in the sense that it does not exist. You just declare superstition is bad because it is not true. I demonstrated there are things that aren't true that aren't bad. Please reformulate your reason for declaring superstition to be intrinsically bad, or just stop. Wow, how you got superstition is bad because it's not true means everything that isn't real is bad is beyond me. I think you should sleep on this one. You see, Lundy, old boy, 1 + 1 = 5 is bad. Why? Because it's false. Why is superstition bad? Because it is false. Because superstition is a bad answer to give to any question. Is 1 + 1 = 5 superstition, as you have relentlessly claiming it is? Only if you believe it is true. You declare superstition to be bad. Why is it bad? Because it's not true. Therefore, the property of not true is defined by you as being bad. Therefore, all fiction is bad. This is what's called an argumentum ad absurdum, demonstrating the silliness of your argument by taking it to absurd logical conclusions. No, I said superstition is bad because it's not true. If it's not a superstition and it's not true, it's not included. For Mr. and Mrs. analogy to work, I must be claiming that 1. Anime is superstition. 2. Superstition is bad because it's a false thing believed to be true. And 3. That the definition of the sentence, a false thing believed to be true, is the word bad, none of which I have asserted. But Mr. Miss, unbeknownst to him, has stated that all 3 things above is the case because he says so. Okay, what is it about superstition that is bad? Because you are just getting worse and worse, as you just included the word superstition in your definition of what's bad about it. So superstition just means bad now, and that's an even worse tautology than before. Quoting you, Beelzebub, then neither of them knows what the thing, the food, actually is they are talking about. End quote. Okay, that's completely disanalogous to Christianity. So can you fix that? My argument states that if we are to take interpretation of Christianity as valid practice, then that would dictate that hell both exists and does not exist, because some Christians claim one of those choices as theirs. I told Biglundi that only one of those choices can actually be true, and so if Christianity is true, then one of them is not practicing Christianity. They can't both be Christian. To show that my argument is wrong, Biglundi asserts, we are both food eaters. I'm vegan. I don't eat meat. I don't consider eating meat eating food. You probably do eat meat. So you think that eating meat is eating food. There, we disagree. But we can still be grouped under the label people that are food eaters, just as Christians can all be placed under the label of Christian. That brings us to Biglundi's retort. You declare superstition to be bad. Why is it bad? Because it's not true. Therefore, the property of not true is defined by you as being bad. Therefore, all fiction is bad. This is what's called an argumentum ad absurdum, demonstrating the silliness of your argument by taking it to absurd logical conclusions. Biglundi attempts to qualify his food analogy fail by stating that if superstition is bad because it is false, that makes anime, pranks, white lies, and fiction bad, because they are all false too. Midas 41 informed Biglundi, bad analogy. Fiction is not making a claim of truth like the Bible or astrology or other superstitious claims. There is no deception, snake oil involved in fiction. We read it knowing it is fiction and don't make decisions based on getting a reward or punishment. Superstition deceives the believer and affects that person's ability to reason and retards human potential. Determined to stick with his dumbness, Biglundi replied, it's a perfectly fine analogy. What is it about superstition itself that is bad? Now you're adding another qualifier besides that it's simply not true, but also that it purports to be true, which was not what Beelzebub said. However, you are now forced to declare the original broadcast of War of the Worlds as bad because it was purported to be true as a prank. It is not another qualifier. It is just the reason that superstition is bad. If you listen to what Beelzebub says, I am pretty sure he mentions it retards human progress. War of the Worlds was not a prank. It did not purport to be true. There were repeated notices that the broadcast was fictional prior to it being broadcast. Quoting Mr. Miss, which was not what Beelzebub said. End quote. I did say that. I said it stops people from ending things like global warming. It is bad all around. Period. You simply missed that, Mr. Miss. You actually never said that. Then how was Midas 41 able to quote me? You actually never said that. But regardless, you're now declaring a harmless prank to be bad. If I tell someone that I have something for them in my room, and they come in and I go April Fools and laugh, you're saying that's bad? Am I about right? Did you just declare April Fool's Day to be bad? Quoting Mr. Miss. Now you're adding another qualifier besides that it is simply not true, but also that it purports to be true, which was not what Beelzebub said. You actually never said that. End quote. I'm referring to the global warming thing in the debate, not the fiction. My debate against Theowarner, for which Biglundi is referencing here. Alright, that's not something about superstition that's bad. We're getting into the problem here of the application of superstition by some people. Do you understand the difference between the two? You better ask yourself that. There is no application of superstition. It's just a false belief. There is no application of superstition. It's just false belief. I want you to keep reading that over and over and over and over and over until you understand how dumb that was. After you, Einstein Jr., no superstition has ever punched a single person in the face. The puncher is projecting his own wants onto a superstition. Yeah, exactly. Superstition doesn't do anything. The people who believe it use it to do things. That's exactly what I just said. The application of superstition. The people are doing it. The superstition has nothing to do with it. That's what I said. Which is why when people declare global warming as not being true because of their belief of superstition, it's the application of their beliefs that is bad, not the beliefs themselves. All Biglundi has just said is that if you believe you should eat bananas because a unicorn told you to, then you do it. That the application of your belief is not your belief being applied. Kindly tell us what is being applied, Mr. Miss. He then goes on to say, again, that although he knows the belief is bad, because if you apply it, bad things can only result, that it is not, in fact, bad, what Mr. Miss would call intrinsically bad, of course. If you don't want to save a dying infant in the gutter because you projected onto a superstition that it does not want you to save babies in the gutter, you are bad. The superstition is bad because it is not real. Eliminate the superstition, that person will have to find a reasonable reason not to pull infants out of the gutter. Okay, so now you're completely changing your position. A superstition is now bad if you allow it to lead you to do bad things, but that would be the person's fault, would it not? Say two people had the same superstition not to pull babies out of the gutter, but one of them decided it wasn't that important and saved the baby anyway. Is the superstition to blame? No, it's the person. If you don't want to save a dying infant in the gutter, you are bad. It is only possible for Mr. Miss to translate that to. A superstition is now bad if you allow it to lead you to do bad things. The superstition had nothing to do with your inaction because unicorns don't exist. Quoting you, Mr. Miss, say two people had the same superstition not to pull babies out of gutters, but one of them decided it wasn't that important and saved the baby anyway. Is the superstition to blame? No, it's the person. End quote. And that's what I said, clown. Here's the cause of your mental breakdown, Mr. Miss. Look at the two exchanges from my Skype debate with Theowarner that you are referencing, that now have us dissecting your world of stupid. What's bad about superstition? It retards mankind. It stops us from exploring, doing things, evolving. People thinking that global warming doesn't exist due to their superstition is a retardation of human reasoning. Okay, accept those as reasons why superstition is intrinsically bad, but superstition has positive effects as well. A positive from superstition. Superstitions are a negative. Superstitions cannot affect anything, Mr. Miss. You can't get a positive from a negative. A superstition has never told anyone to help a little lady across the street. A superstitious person is projecting positive onto the superstition. Do you recall missing those words from the debate, Mr. Miss? You, Mr. Miss, not hearing any of this above while listening to it, came to my channel armed with, you said superstition is bad because it is a negative. That's a tautology. No, your statement is the result of bad parentage. At least one of those fuck-ups should have been helping you with something while you were failing to grow up. You, Mr. Miss, have mashed up everything I told Theo into. You said superstition is bad because it is a negative. That means you are calling anime negative. That means you're saying superstition is bad because it's bad. A tautology, which would make fiction bad because it's false. That means you're saying video games are bad because they cause all players to kill someone. And I'm telling you, Beelzebub, that if a player decides to disobey the game and not kill someone, it's not the game that caused his decision, but the player. So, you need to change your definition of the word superstition from a false thing believed to cause player murder to a false thing that doesn't cause player murder, to distinguish it from other things that don't cause player murder, so that people won't think those things cause player murder. Paraphrasing you, Mr. Miss, if I tell someone I have something in my room for them, and they come in and I yell, April Fool, that means that is superstition, because they believed it was true when it was false. End of paraphrase. Is telling someone you have something for them in your room superstition? I don't know. What the hell is superstition? But besides that, you were saying that superstition is bad because it is not true and it purports itself to be true. So when I tell someone I have something in my room and I actually don't, I match both those criteria. So as a result, you're necessarily saying pranks of that nature are bad. Quoting Mr. Miss, I don't know. What the hell is superstition? End quote. Superstition is a false thing believed to be true by someone. That's all it is. Okay then, yes. My declaring I have something in my room for someone to trick them into coming into my room as a prank would be superstition under that definition. All pranks that are, at some point in time, believed by people that fool people would be superstition according to you. So I ask you again, are you declaring April Fool's Day to be bad? Fooling people is not superstition because you have already defined it as a prank. Apples and oranges are both fruit, but apples are not oranges due to that fact. Oranges are defined as oranges, apples as apples. So let's contrast that with your umpteenth analogy fail, Mr. Miss. You said apples are bad because they have seeds. Well, oranges have seeds too, so that means you're saying that oranges are bad. And because the seeds of apples and oranges bear the same fruit, that means all fruit is bad, because all fruit has seeds. Capiche? But you define superstition as something that is not true that people believe, and pranks fall under that definition. So that means you need to redefine what superstition means. Minus 41, let Biglundi know. Word games aren't helping you any more than they help Theo. Superstition is more than that. It is 1. An irrational belief that an object, action, or circumstance not logically related to a course of events influences its outcome. 2. A belief, practice, or right irrationally maintained by ignorance of the laws of nature or by faith in magical chance. 2B. A fearful or abject state of mind resulting from such ignorance or irrationality. 2C. Definition of a prank. A mischievous trick or practical joke, especially one in which something is done rather than said. To this, Biglundi had to say, yawn. You're an intellectual lightweight. I already pointed out that under that definition, April Fool's Day is necessarily a bad thing. Retarding humans isn't something superstition does. It's what people who choose to take it more seriously than others do. It's a property of the adherent, not the subject. Also, bitching about word games is generally symbolic of someone who simply doesn't know what they're talking about and are offended at feeling stupid. After calling minus 41 an intellectual lightweight, Biglundi ran back to his ineptitude. Okay, so say I believe unicorns existed at one time. They don't affect the world now, but at one time I believe they existed. I don't reject evolution because of it. I don't derive any bad morals from it. It's simply something patently false that I believe to be true. Would that count? Biglundi awaited an answer to this. We all just left the clown to traverse his moronic mind alone. Many would leave comments on my video pages informing me that I am inarticulate. In other words, I am not familiar with philosophy speak, language, and that this inhibits my points getting across at times. I put out the word that if anyone had any book suggestions so that I could bone up my articulation, to please leave them in the comments. Many folks did. It was due to this call that Troll 1 and Troll 2 unleashed their full-throttled delinquency. They were prompted to their trollish behavior by a book suggestion from a friend of mine named Man. I would suggest starting with an Intro to Philosophy textbook, and then focusing on the rest of his suggestions are not required for what follows. This brought Troll 1, Theowarner, out to proclaim Bertrand Russell's A History of Western Philosophy is excellent. It will make a good introductory text, Beelzebub. There's our 2 series of books too. One is called A Very Short Introduction to, and the other is A Brief Insight. These are excellent for people approaching complex topics who just want a functioning handle on them. This made me laugh. Eventually, anyway. From the guy that told me that God can be both triune and not triune, because I would be excluding people from Christianity if I say that God can only be one of those. To prove his point that something can be and not be, he told us that rocks are food if we say they are food. Troll 2, Mr. Miss, interjected. Getting into Leibniz, Descartes, Kant, and Kierkegaard are fantastic. Kant and Kierkegaard specifically, because much of what they say and believe is compatible with an atheistic worldview. I feel like Epicurus should be tossed in for good measure. Oh, certainly, of course. If we're going to go that far, we can encourage the writings of Plato and Aristotle as well, and given Beelzebub's disposition. Diogenes. I'd recommend Pascal. But something tells me until Beelzy gets past all these books and authors, he wouldn't really understand much of Pascal's work. I was kind of hoping to do a video on Pascal a while back. I think he's being largely misused by our apologist friends. Rationalism has its liabilities. Let me save you the time. Check out this video. Thanks. Sisyphus and I are friends, and it's always fun to see his work. It was into the Midas 41. Encouraged good old Troll 1 and Troll 2. I am so enjoying watching the intellectual heavyweights exchanging all these super duper hints about philosophers. I hope you're paying attention, Billy Bob. I have not seen a display of two people kissing each other's asses like this for quite a while. Some would say it is a tad embarrassing, but to me it is entertainment gold. Not sure what's embarrassing about suggesting great authors and philosophers. Some might say embarrassing, not me. This is entertainment, watching the supercilious posturing and mocking under the guise of being helpful. Beelzebub has clearly shown he can step up and is engaged with learning. He may not articulate it perfectly, but he gets the dishonesty going on with Theo, who is really anti-intellectual. The irony of your comments may be lost on you and Theo, a person who also likes to condescend and posture without saying much. Perhaps take the log out of your own eyes first. Supercilious, posturing, and mocking. Right. So suggesting authors are supercilious. Okay, buddy. Also, what dishonesty? What has Theo lied about? You keep trying to talk down to Theo and myself by essentially demonstrating how ignorant you are of what we're talking about and declaring that your misunderstanding is our fault for posture. The irony of your comments may be lost on you. Gotta say, pot kettle black. Suggesting authors is fine. It is the mocking way you went about it. Read back. That is supercilious. Theo was dishonest using obfuscation, making communication confusing and ambiguous. He throws in red herrings, pretends not to understand clear communications, talks in circles, and generally postures in a condescending way to avoid meaningful conversation. You and Theo might get your jollies playing word games, but there's no goodwill and no attempt to address the problems with superstitious beliefs. You are very generous with your insults, though. I am perfectly able to understand the subjective nature of language, the ambiguity that many words have, which is why it is useful to work on having clearer and more useful definitions. Not BS about including bus in the definition of car. It is just mean childish crap, not the realm of the intellectual. At 3:30 on this video, Billsy tells it like it is. Theo wants to discuss others' beliefs, but refuses to discuss his own beliefs. As Billsy says, Theo wants to play for free. He doesn't want to place his God's head on the guillotine. He tells people their definitions are wrong, but refuses to give definitions. You don't have to look hard to see what is going on here. But if I am missing something, feel free to fill me in. And just to be clear, when I quoted Beelzebub, I acknowledge that we don't actually know what Theo believes about God or lack thereof, as he refuses to provide a level playing field, or any rules, or any definitions, or anything that a normal, rational person can work with. He may think it is very clever, but I think his tactics just frustrate useful conversation. I point this out as I don't want you telling me I am strawmanning Theo or misunderstanding his position. Socrates 856. Actually, Beelzebub gave the correct and useful version of intellectual in this very video, a version Theo didn't provide. Theo simply dropped some names and called those who did not drop names anti-intellectual. But in intellectual, she used their brains to come up with arguments, ideas, not feel special because they could drop names. I.e., to give Theo credit here is to misunderstand that this is in contrast to what he advocated. You can never read a book and still love philosophy. And worse, one can read many volumes of philosophy books by famous guys and never actually use one's intellect at all. Theo simply dropped names and called those that do not drop names anti-intellectual. Please point me to the video and the exact quote where he said exactly this. I'll bet you can't because he never did. You can never read a book and still love philosophy. Well, you're not acting conducive to that love by not reading philosophy books. So it would be rather illogical to do so. Yes, he did, but you are happy to jump to a certain conclusion, I see. He keeps private in videos, but he did drop Kant, Nietzsche, and Freud, without giving any suggestions why they mattered at all to the discussion. Philosophy is the love of thinking, not the love of reading. If reading helps, sure, read yourself silly. I love to read, which is why I'm still waiting for Theo to explain what exactly of Nietzsche we shall consider. I think we should act conducive to thinking first, then reading. The next slate of comments comes from my video, Response: What do you mean, you people, Beelzebub? The video was in reply to one a CardinalVirtues made to me in attempted rebuttal of a previous one of my own. The setup is as follows. I informed all in a previous video of mine that there are 4 nouns we are dissecting here, 4 separate topics. 1, the word Christian. 2, the people that call themselves that word have adopted that label as their title. 3, the religion of Christianity. And 4, the supernatural entity, God. Those people assert invented the word Christian and the religion Christianity. I gave them a definition, could be the God's definition, who knows, of the word Christian. A noun being a person, place, thing, or idea. I told them that the definition of the word Christian is a thing that is to follow the orders of the God that invented the word. I informed them that the orders to be followed are to be found in the God's other invention, Christianity. One of the God's orders in Christianity is that the Christian is to murder their own infant without remorse if the God orders them to. That order is called the story of Abraham and Isaac. I told the people that have decided to adopt the label of Christian as their title that they are agreeing to perform that act. That dictates that you are either a savage if you would, and dishonest if you find it an abhorrent action, yet maintain that title as yours. Mr. Miss quoting me, I mean Christians. I've yet to meet an honest Christian. End quote. Then you're not looking. Holy shit, this video says so much about you, and you're completely unashamed of your bigoted behavior. If you are a Christian, to defend some of these statements made in it to maintain your belief reveals one of two things. You are a savage or you are dishonest. Contradiction is the definition of the Bible. Don't believe me? Well, you have a very incoherent manner of typing. A Christian can be both not a savage and honest. In this very video, Mr. Miss is on the page talking about. I told him that if you can't uphold baby murder, the firstborn of Egypt, as good without your God telling you it is, yet you can still worship this God, that makes you a savage or dishonest. I then told him I'd never met an honest Christian. I went on to tell him I had met many an honest person that calls themselves a Christian though. But you, of course, Mr. Miss, will miss the scope of that statement. So let's get back to his missing. You have a very incoherent manner of typing. A Christian can be both not a savage and honest. There's literally nothing preventing those characteristics in Christianity. I have no idea where you got this notion from. Christians are dishonest and savage, period. By my definition of a Christian, the word, not the people that call themselves that word. Mr. Miss was never able to make that distinction. Human beings are savage, dishonest, honest, and humane. When you see a person acting amicably, it's not because they are Christian, it's because that's something humans do. So none of the nice stuff in the Bible is new, unless before the Bible came out, people were pure shit and became what we are now after Bible publication. The only thing worth noting in the Bible is the bad stuff, the superstition, the magic. If you dispute that, prove me wrong. Christians are dishonest and savage, period. By my definition of a Christian. Okay, your definition fails then. It doesn't matter if nothing in the Bible that's nice is new. If they ascribe their honesty and niceness to the Bible teaching them the values, they're still being altruistic as a result of being a Christian. They may not need to be a Christian to be altruistic, but they still are. The only thing worth noting in the Bible is the bad stuff. Any Christian can call that human error. Quoting Mr. Miss. If they ascribe their honesty and niceness to the Bible teaching them the values, they're still being altruistic as a result of being a Christian. End quote. If you ascribe anything to something else, you've gained nothing. It did, unless it paid you for it. When Theowarner informed us that superstitions, a negative, can produce a positive, he stated that if I believe there is a unicorn living in my furnace that wants me to help old ladies across the street, that if I go out and do that, that's the result of the superstition, not me. I informed Theowarner that that is simply him projecting what he wants onto the superstition, that it is all him. His retort, so what? And here is Mr. Miss rehashing everything he heard me explain to Theowarner, all of which Theowarner conceded. Mr. Miss quoting me. The only thing worth noting in the Bible is the bad stuff. End quote. Any Christian can call that human error. A Christian can call it what they like. I call what they call Christianity human error. This brings us full circle to another point I made to Mr. Miss, that Mr. Miss missed. That you can't make up willy-nilly anything you want. God is trying or not, period. A bus is not a car, period. And Christian can easily write off all the bad stuff in the Bible as being a result of translation issues, human error in attempting to write down God's word through revelation, or even that the Bible isn't meant to be read as God's word, but simply what people think God wants to tell them. There are so many different reasons that are honest and sincere. A Christian can hold to totally disregard all the bad stuff in the Bible, yet you ignore all of it and don't care. That's fundamentalist. You're right, I do choose to ignore it. I do choose to write it off, as easily as you choose to write off what I say. For the same reason you choose to ignore everything I've said Christianity is. If you think you choose to ignore what I've called it because it isn't true, then you are mistaken. When you have finally discovered the root cause of your discomfort, come see me again, quoting Mr. Miss, or even that the Bible isn't meant to be read, etc. This brings us full circle to another point I made to Mr. Miss, that Mr. Miss missed, that the God is asserted to be omniscient and omnipotent. Such power dictates that the people would know what this God wants to tell them. Mr. Miss quoting me, in the video, imagine Theowarner is an atheist and Bionic Dance is a theist. End quote. No, Billsy, that's not what you did in your video. Theowarner gave adequate descriptions and reasons for why he felt Bionic Dance qualified as a stupid atheist in the very least, and compared to other far greater atheist thinkers who have written books on the topic. You didn't do anything but say, you're a Christian, that makes you a Nazi and a terrorist. Even if that's how you meant it, you still failed. A YouTuber named Theowarner, a professed Roman Catholic, told me that his God's epistemology is too above him to comprehend. He stated that although the act of infanticide is abhorrent, that his God has its reasons for ordering it. the story of Abraham and Isaac. I told Theowarner that he is indistinguishable from a Nazi, as that was their favorite cry during their war crime trials after World War II. I was just following orders. Theowarner went on to make a video after that in which he said, paraphrasing him, I laugh how atheists speak ill of Christianity because they just think they are moral. He is referring to me, Beelzebub, in my disgust at his adoration of the slavery, rape, torture, bigotry, hate, racism, murder, and genocide endorsed by his life's love, Roman Catholicism. It is also his capitulation to the fact that he knows his religion is immoral, as he recognizes me as thinking I am. To make such a comparison to me dictates that Theowarner knows what morality is, and he knows it isn't Roman Catholicism. And in ascribing it to me, knows I am moral, and that he is not moral, as he has embraced his immorality. Mr. Misquoting me. In the video, imagine Theowarner is an atheist and bionic dance is a theist, end quote. No, Billsy, that's not what you did in your video. Theowarner gave adequate descriptions of reasons why he felt, etc. That's one theory anyway. Theory, that's what he did, and you specifically edited out him doing that in your video aimed at him. And you did call him a Nazi and a terrorist for being a Christian. It's a theory backed up by all the facts. Give me a single fact that disputes it. Your theory is you saying you know what I was doing in contrast to what I told you I was doing. In essence, calling me a liar. Now you want me to continue. If I'm lying, what more is there you want to hear from me? Mr. Misquoting me. In essence, you're calling me a liar. End quote. Or you're just completely ignorant of what's going on. It's fully possible that you simply have a tunnel vision of generalizations and have lost touch with reality a little bit and aren't aware you're doing what you're doing. Right now, you come off like the worst kind of atheist, specifically a religious kind of atheist, a fundamentalist atheist. You need to stop, take a breath, and realize that you just might be wrong on this one. Or you might be wrong. Mr. Miss. Quoting Mr. Miss, specifically a religious kind of atheist, a fundamentalist atheist, end quote. What exactly is your abhorrence of these kinds of atheists? They say stuff you don't like. What's my abhorrence to fundamentalist atheists? The ill-read nature of them, the uneducated approach they use to paint atheism in a bad light. That's what I have a problem with. And the reason you need to stop, because you give atheists like me a bad name. Atheists like Das, American Atheist, a bad name. Atheists like Coughlin, a bad name. Atheists like Skep and CD and, well, shit, every other atheist on YouTube, a bad name. Why? Because you're being a Christianophobe. And I didn't even think those existed. Seriously, what you're saying is quite alarming. Well, your name is very important to my work. It's why I do what I did. When I become you won't have to worry about me anymore. Okay, so you don't care about me, but you do talk about the cause a lot. So I figured you cared about atheists in general and how they come off. What differentiates you from any other atheist? If you believe a serial killer reflects on you, Mr. Miss, you are simply a fool. If you believe I will allow anyone to judge me by your antics, Mr. Miss, you are more than just a fool. Mr. Miss quoting me, a Christian will butcher their own family in their sleep if told, end quote. Nope, they won't. Crazy Christians will. Then shut the fuck up. But most Christians would recognize the silliness of acting on such impulses. But you believe Christianity should be left up to men to define because it is subjective. So you believe it is alright for some Christians to butcher their families if told. That was quite possibly the most retarded statement I've heard from you yet. Me quoting Mr. Miss. But you believe Christianity should be left up to men to define because it is subjective. End quote. And no, Mr. Miss, as I've told you 10 billion times, the existence of multiple interpretations, denominations of Christianity dictates that the Christian is claiming that Christianity is subjective, relative, that their God is both triune and not triune. Quoting Mr. Miss, so you believe it is alright for some Christians to butcher their families if told, end quote. No, Mr. Miss, that is an invention of your own twisted sight that you have projected onto me. Me quoting Mr. Miss, that was quite possibly the most retarded statement I've heard from you yet, end quote. That you heard that from me only confirms in everyone's mind from my context, Gamut Man, Minus 41, Big Boy, Snake Plissken's, Bionic Dance, etc., all the way down to myself, that you scrape the shit stain of retardation. After informing Mr. Miss must be over 100 times, and a plethora of others doing the same, must be dozens of times each, that interpreting Christianity cannot be accepted because hell either exists or it doesn't. So one Christian denomination cannot claim it does while another claim it does not. A thing Mr. Miss conceded is going on in Christianity in my Skype debate with him, yet he couldn't grasp it. I decided to see if I could get him to think he came up with the idea so we could move on. Quoting Mr. Miss, a Christian will butcher their own family in their sleep if told. Nope, they won't. Crazy Christians will. But most Christians would recognize the silliness of acting on such impulses. You saying otherwise implies you know what a Christian is. End the debate by enlightening us. Otherwise, stop bitching about my definition of a Christian. Okay, here's one. Someone with a sincere belief in the relationship between Jesus Christ, God, the Holy Spirit, and themselves. How's that for one? Also, did you literally just say, unless you give a definition, mine wins? Are you 12? No, Mr. Miss, I just had you create a denomination of Christianity to bust the Theowarner's car. That is a car. Now tell us what Christianity is. I already did. Whatever anyone says it is. That's right. Whatever anyone says it is. How did you get that out of what I said? You just defined it. Are you now saying your definition is wrong? No, so then it's right. Sure, for any Christian that agrees with it, it's right. Then Christianity is whatever anyone says it is. No, Christianity is whatever is true for the individual when they call themselves a Christian. That's what I said. No, what you said is that a Christian is whatever anyone says it is, which isn't what I said. I said that the Christian is free to define their Christianity. If it were what anyone says it is, then it would be valid for you to say Christianity is about being okay with rape and murder and ascribe it to people, which isn't valid. The difference exists only in your imagination, Mr. Miss. We now move on to my video. Theowarner makes up new stuff, and Biglundi and CardinalVirtues too is a reply to multiple attacks these three have launched against me. They, their subscribers and friends and others, are unable to accept the fact of the truths contained in this video, and a coordinated digital age book burning campaign began flagging this video as well as all the others I made in reply to Theowarner's and their attacks upon me, personal and otherwise. In retaliation, I and my subscribers went on the attack. This caused a pretty big war. The difference between the combatants in the war is that Theowarner and his garbage flagged our comments and reported our retaliations. This caused YouTube to take my Generator Godkiller channel down. We have been in some pretty big wars before, with Enoch 2 and John the Hut Dweller to name a couple, but they didn't stoop to Theowarner's game's level. Theo and his camp, in the middle of losing the battle, removed, deleted all their trash from our pages, blocked us from their pages, and began reporting us. We realized it was a trap. Well, I'm back. Theowarner and his peeps were destroyed. CardinalVirtues was wise enough to close his channel. Theowarner was similar in that, although he didn't close his channel, he removed every video he had ever made to me, and before he engaged me, because I ripped them to shreds. Theowarner called me stupid and dumb, told me he would continue to call me stupid and dumb, because I am stupid and dumb. He went on to include pussy and a plethora of other insults to boot. Well, I even forced that bitch boy to remove the picture of himself he used as an avatar, because I tore that apart too due to the look on his dumbass face. He replaced it with a Bitmoji. Theowarner was abandoned by his own people, including Mr. Miss. Mr. Miss, however, not only didn't close his channel like a bunch of those trash did, but didn't even take down all the videos he made to us. We, of course, were dumbfounded by this. I went to Mr. Miss and asked him why all this garbage was still up. He told me because it is. I asked him if he still hasn't gotten it after all this time. Is he still claiming my argument doesn't prove gods don't exist? He said no. I asked him, and if you know there's no such thing as a god, why is this garbage still up? I told him to take it down. He told me to go fuck myself. So, let's continue, shall we? Still not answering the question. Mr. Miss claimed that he, Theowarner, CardinalVirtues, and the rest of their retarded bunch had rebutted all the points of my argument. He claimed I never once responded to any of their rebuttals and asked me to do so. I told them all that none of you have ever responded to my argument, because none of you even know what it is. Mr. Miss asserted they do. Mr. Miss told me that I was forwarding an argument called the Argument from Divine Hiddenness, and didn't know that I was because I am just that damn moronic. This brings us to still not answering the question. Questions. I thought I was to answer rebuttals. None have been forwarded to respond to, because you think there have been is your problem. You know, if you actually succeeded in disproving Yahweh, you would receive a Nobel Prize, yet you haven't. Maybe there's a reason. What does that tell you? Simply that you are an ignoramus. Lomaxian too. Come on, Biglundi. You're better than that. If you actually succeeded in disproving Yahweh, you would receive a Nobel Prize. No, you wouldn't. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and chalk that up as a drunk comment. No, I'm serious. Philosophers have been trying for ages upon ages to establish a 100% logically valid and sound proof that God doesn't or does exist. Yahweh too. If he could manage to actually pull that off, he'd be doing what all the PhD philosophers have decided cannot be done. Nobel Prize. Mr. Miss is fond of calling me ignorantly stupid. Mr. Miss has told me that I have no clue what reasoning and logic is, so I should just shut the fuck up. Well, Mr. Miss has just asserted that his PhD daddy told him gods exist, but Mr. Miss asserts he doesn't believe it. Mr. Miss has just asserted that his PhD daddy told him gods can't be proven to not exist, and Biglundi asserts he believes it. Mr. Miss is a superstitious clown. I told Mr. Miss that 1 + 1 = 5 is false. I told Mr. Miss that I can demonstrate that 1 + plus 1 equals 5 is false. Mr. Miss told me that I was an illogical fool because his PhD daddy told him that the proposition 1 plus 1 equals 5 is false, cannot be proven. He went on to further say that if your dumbass could prove 1 plus 1 equals 5 is false, you'd win a Nobel Prize for peace. Mr. Miss also informed me that I need to shut the fuck up because atheists like me give atheists like him a bad name through their ignorant, stupid, illogical arguments. Quoting Mr. Miss, if he could manage to actually pull that off, he'd be doing what all PhD philosophers have decided cannot be done. End quote. They've decided, huh? Yeah, been decided for a while. Can't be done. So submit your little argument to the Nobel Prize Committee and see what they think. I have a feeling they'll give you the same reaction we've been giving you. If your superstition, Mr. Miss, makes you so defiant, do it for me. You know where to download the transcript. Go ahead and make your day. Oh, why haven't you? Scared little baby. Quoting Mr. Miss, can't be done. End quote. And according to you, you possess their evidence for this amazing feat of mental dexterity. Well, yeah, go to any academic philosophical encyclopedia concerning God's existence. The conversation has gotten to the point that people don't even think the phrases God exists or God doesn't exist make any actual sense. So Mr. Miss's evidence that you can't prove gods don't exist is to tell us there is no evidence to demonstrate that. You can't prove gods don't exist. The fact that your evidence that gods can't be disproven is because someone told you they can't be must really impress the fuck out your mama, boy. Well, I get it now. You're mixing your lack of belief with the theist's actual belief. I'll spell it out for you as I did in part 2 of the video. Guess you missed that too. The Christian's notion of an actually existing God can be proved to not exist. That's what that thing you and Theo want to talk about. Go jerk each other off. I'm not mixing them at all. I'm informing you that everyone who's educated on the matter says that, in fact, it cannot be proven one way or the other. It's very simple. By what metric do you determine that leprechauns and unicorns are exactly as likely to exist as Yahweh? The metric that they are all supernatural entities. I told you to go jerk off Theo. I know how bad you two want to nut on my shoes, but you have to reserve that for each other. You know, you get really pissed off when people don't answer your questions. So why don't you answer ours? Seems hypocritical. Of course, if your only defense is accusations of homosexuality, which to me implies a sort of homophobia, which you so deride in your videos, so even more hypocrisy from you, then I have to presume you can't answer the questions and are demonstrating you don't know what you're talking about, which has been par for the course for everything in our back and forth. If your only defense is accusations of homosexuality, I keep forgetting you miss everything. Since you're the big bad philosopher, I thought you would get the nod to mental masturbation. Guess not, which to me implies a sort of homophobia. Yeah, yours with that comment. I never said nutting on each other's shoes is a thing to be avoided for some mysterious reason, only that you will never have the opportunity. The point I made still stands. You refuse to answer the questions. Probably because you can't. Ooh, back in the kindergarten sandbox, are we? Still not answering the question. Questions I thought I was to answer rebuttals. None have been forwarded to respond to because you think they have been is your problem. Well, Maxine, too. There is no such thing as a Nobel Prize in philosophy, nor is there any such thing as a 100% proof. Nor can you prove the negative of a positive that has no coherent definition. I must put to bed for good the superstition that God has not been coherently defined, and therefore is unfalsifiable. The definition of God is a being that snapped its fingers and created existence. That is as coherent as a definition can get. To read that definition and to claim that you don't know what it is asserting because it doesn't make sense to you is to state that the words that comprise that definition are unintelligible. God is not an incoherently defined concept, nor has philosophy ever proven anything. Firstly, it'd be the Nobel Peace Prize. Secondly, I know that's the point. Thirdly, I know that's the point. Fourthly, I know that's the point. Thank you for proving my point. I'm sorry. I thought you argued that the disproof of God would earn you the prize for academic achievement. How exactly would disproving the existence of God earn you a Nobel Peace Prize, though? Are you saying that the belief in Yahweh inherently leads to large-scale conflict? My contention was simply that disproving Yahweh would earn you a Nobel Prize. But I'll happily change my position if you make a substantive case that the worship of Yahweh in all of its forms leads to violence. Who says you need to prevent violence to win the Nobel Peace Prize? Remember when Obama won it? The thing is, this has been a debate raging on in academia for thousands of years. The Yahweh belief has been used in the past to justify very bad things, like retarding science classrooms and homosexuals from marrying. If it could in fact be disproved, all the things that Bill seems to think are inherent within Christianity would have one less excuse. That's worthy of a prize. I could easily pick through that comment and continue to dig this conversation into a quagmire of useless shite. For the sake of both our integrities, I'm not going to bite. What puzzles me to the point of crazy is why you have seemingly aligned yourself with Warner. I can't find a shred of sincerity in him. He seems to me to be nothing more than a highly skilled and evasive troll. So sincerely, why are you interested in this? Because what you seem to see in Warner is what I see in Billsy. What I see in Billsy, I stated my evaluation of Theowarner, and I'll be brave enough to insinuate his sole motivation seems to be channeled using profit. Either that or he's so desperately cornered that he daren't positively assert anything. Otherwise, I'm at a loss. You can call Billsy a lot of things, but two things you can't accuse him of is being indirect or ambiguous. I'm not trying to trap you here. I just don't get you when it comes to this issue. What's your goal? I have a problem with atheists who use bad arguments because it reflects badly on all of us. And when Billsy spouts bigoted, illogical nonsense to insult literally all Christians, even those who could be allies towards a secular government and most of our values, is something to fight against. Quoting Mr. Miss. And when Billsy spouts bigoted, illogical nonsense to insult literally all Christians, stop putting words in my mouth, bitch. That makes you the epitome of I have a problem with atheists who use bad arguments. The fact that dash babies to death against stones before their parents doesn't bother you makes you no better than a theist you support. Why do you think I don't have a problem with dashing babies against stones? I never said anything of the sort. Biglundi informed me that nothing in the Bible annoys him. Yet you put words in my mouth while berating me for supposedly doing the same to you. Billsy, it's simple. You have declared that Christianity is about all the bad things you keep parroting nonstop, without any evidence other than, well, that's what it says in the Bible. Where would you prefer I gather the evidence of what Christianity states, buffoon, since you are declaring the Bible is not Christianity? It's hilarious and sad at the same time. I know you wish you could put forth coherent arguments, but you can't. To make such a declaration shows you are clueless to what a coherent argument is. Lomaxing too. This is my position, roughly. There are many abhorrent and unambiguous passages in the Bible. I believe that to adopt the badge of Christianity is to offer tacit support for this legislation, and, in turn, those who use the doctrine to promote bigoted opinions. I appreciate how powerful methods of indoctrination are, which is why I'm staunchly anti-theocratic. My support for Bill's position is tentative, but you have to admit that these atrocities are implicit in the Bible. Biglundi quoting Lomaxian too. I believe that to adopt the badge of Christianity is to offer tacit support to this legislation. End quote. Even if Christianity predates the Bible, Mr. Miss has just asserted that the contents of the Bible are not Christianity, that these are two separate entities. He told me in our Skype debate that because of that, Christians of today do not hold subscription to the atrocities depicted in the Bible. Mr. Miss went around toting his revelation that because the Bible and Christianity are independent, that it rebuts my argument. I told Mr. Miss that the Bible is a conglomeration of the best of Christianity, that it is comprised of the Christian texts, that it is Christianity. He called me the dumbest person he'd ever encountered. Stan Marsh. Christians are a group of people that hold a common belief. If you wanted to get rid of the idea, you would say Christianity. If you can prove Christians hold a common belief, then you will have just defined Christianity, and all denominations but one have poofed out of existence. Christians have to have some commonality with each other, or else they wouldn't be called Christians. And again, what I define as Christianity might be different to how someone else defines it. Who was right? Christians have to have some commonality. This singularly denotes the non-existence of Christianity. Christianity doesn't have to have anything in common with itself. The next two cherry-picked comments are from my video. My response video Biglundi completely ignored. My boy Snake Pliskinus made a video entitled, Billsy Bob is demonstratively smarter than Biglundi. Also, I am king of atheism. Bow chicka bow down. In which he, like so many others, attempted to explain my argument to Mr. Miss. The video appeared before my Skype debate with Mr. Miss. Snake let me upload it to my channel and rename it. My response video Biglundi completely ignored. Billsy, I responded to that video. Are you an idiot? Never mind that question. You just don't pay attention to anything. Just go away, Billsy. Just go away. Then why did you proceed to ask me every question that was answered from you in that video in our debate? You are one comical farce. We now move to the comments from my video. Theowarner, CardinalVirtues, Biglundi, Seabot, and others with commentary. Okay, I understand the argument from the divine hiddenness bills. I understand the argument from non-belief. There's a great video by Theoretical Bullshit that says it way better. CardinalVirtues, Biglundi, Seba, and others began telling me how stupid I am after Theowarner told them I was presenting the argument from divine hiddenness, the argument from non-belief, and some others. I guess Theo couldn't make up their mind for them, and kept pointing me to videos and websites explaining those arguments. Mr. Miss is informing me that Theoretical Bullshit explains the argument that I am rehashing far better than me. Oh, sorry. Far better than Mr. Miss can articulate in a way someone as stupid as I am can comprehend, as Mr. Miss told me in our debate. What I have a problem with is all your other bad philosophical points and how they lead you to think that you've completely proven God doesn't exist and that you can call Christians child murderers and all those other claims that are just ontologically retarded. You still miss. My argument has nothing to do with divine hiddenness. I don't know the argument from non-belief refers. I have proven that God sans interpretation does not exist. The very fact that interpretation exists proves the non-existence of the Christian God. If you'd like to, pick an interpreted God out of the multiple thousands of Christian denominations, interpretations you'd like me to debunk. And since the very religion, by presenting the Bible as evidence, states that God wants humanity to know it exists, humanity would, because that's what the God wants. If it didn't, the Bible would not exist. Watch the video I gave you. The argument from non-belief is essentially that if God wants us to know him, yet we argue about it and it's unclear whether he's even there, then that's evidence against God's existence. That's the whole argument. That's the argument you just declared is yours in this video. Of course, that's not what you originally said because you're not very articulate. Also, it's not an argument that absolutely proves the Christian God doesn't exist. So, Mr. Misquoting me. And since the very religion, by presenting the Bible as evidence, states that God wants humanity to know it exists, humanity would, because that's what the God wants. End quote. But what if they don't consider the Bible authoritative to their particular dogma? You're kind of screwed there, aren't you? As I said, if someone wants to pick an interpretation for me to debunk exclusively, bring it to me. Pick one. But I'll leave all the reading up on that interpretation to you. All I need from you are the attributes given this interpretation: omniscience, omnipotence, etc., and the magic feats ascribed to it, its creation story, and I'll debunk its existence for you. Okay, can we start with you debunking Theowarner's position? Unfortunately, you've made a lot of videos about him and have consistently failed to do so time and again. So clearly it's not as easy as you seem to want to say it is. Theo has never given me a position. If you heard him do so, please give it to me. I know Theo never gave you his position, and you've been wrong on every assumption you've made about him, making this whole debunking attempt of yours rather weak. Debunking what? His position or what I'm actually debunking? I've never attempted to debunk anything Theowarner believes, because he's never given me anything he believes. Your statement is more than weak. Note: this is the guy that told me that my lack of reasoning ability reflects on him, and therefore I make him embarrassed to call himself an atheist. My context: it is absurd to make a claim of truth when there is nothing to support the claim as actually being true. It is equally absurd to disbelieve a claim of truth simply because it has not been fully proven. And there's plenty of facts to support that we don't know God's intentions. I mean, you don't, do you? I know I don't. Hell, I don't even believe in the guy. We do know the God's intentions, you fucking ignoramus. Its intent is for us to practice its prophet religion, Christianity, to concede to the Sabbath, etc. Midas 41. In reply to Mr. Miss. Ha, what a stupid thing to say. It's not even partially proven. God is just asserted. Lack of a belief in claims with no evidence is perfectly rational. The one making a truth claim needs to support it with evidence to be taken seriously. The babble that Theo goes on with to obfuscate the pink elephant in the room is pathetic. He may have faith or special interpretations he won't share about this book written by Bronze Age men, but it ain't exactly an factual academic position, is it? Well, I know you think it's stupid to say, but that's mainly because, as you've demonstrated, philosophy isn't your strong suit, and you really don't know what you're talking about. It's not uncommon for someone who doesn't understand the opposition to refer to it as babble and obfuscations. So yeah, if you don't know Theo's beliefs, you can't really declare that it is not academic or factual, can you? I can claim Theo has not once backed his nuanced God beliefs with a scrap of evidence, so I have no problem calling his position not academic or factual. It reminds me of the Emperor's New Clothes. Everyone is tiptoeing around the fucking obvious. I don't care if he believes fairy tales. Call it blind faith and be done with it. But his total unwillingness to support his beliefs with evidence, at the same time acting in a pretentious and condescending manner, is a bit much. Mr. Misquoting Midas 41. I can claim Theo has not once backed up his nuanced God beliefs with a scrap of evidence. End quote. And he told me that the Westboro Baptists were wrong, that Ray Comfort was wrong, that the evangelicals are wrong. He then told me that he was right, and to prove it, he told me a bus is a car, which was only evidence that he and they are all right. Fucktard. Real quick, can you give me an empirical evidence? That empirical evidence is good. You sound like a logical positivist. Yeah, 1 + 1 = 2 allows you to pay the right amount of taxes. Ask your boy Theowarner. It's not that he doesn't want to support his beliefs. It's that his beliefs are that he shouldn't evangelize. Why do you have such a problem with Christians who are against evangelizing? Isn't that a good thing, you dumbass? Because his beliefs are not that he shouldn't evangelize, Mr. Miss. As Theo told us all, including you, he doesn't discuss his beliefs with people that ask about them. Because people are only asking so that they can shit on his beliefs, while he wholeheartedly shits on the beliefs of the Westboro Baptists, Ray Comfort, and the evangelicals. You dumbass. Evangelizing is not necessary to explain what you believe so others can understand your intellectual position. For example, Yusuf El Tahir's videos on bills, he makes the effort to explain the basis of his beliefs and the differences and strains of Christianity. It allows for intelligent discourse. It is honest, includes history of Christianity, and is a way to examine the actual belief system. I actually like Theo, but I find his position very weak on this subject. Well, that's fine. Theo explains how he interprets the Bible and how he finds Bill's interpretation to be flawed. Have you seen his latest video on the binding of Isaac? Note, the reason Mr. Miss is bringing up the binding of Isaac is because as there are so many interpretations of denominations of Christianity, I decided to create an interpretation of my own to drive home the point that if anyone disputes my interpretation, then they are asserting that interpreting the Christian text is an invalid practice, that the passages in the Bible can possess but one meaning, hence the existence of multiple denominations would not be. I chose the story of Abraham and Isaac, telling them that that story is informing humans, that you are to follow the orders of this God, no remorse, no matter how heinous the order. Biglundi informed me that that is not what that story is saying. He said the story only means God ordered Abraham to bind Isaac to a stone. I informed Biglundi that if that is the case, then his interpretation is the only one that should be, and multiple denominations should not exist. He asked me how I got that from what he said and told me I was an idiot. Have you seen his latest video on the binding of Isaac? Yes, I watched it, but I drifted off. It was so boring. Regardless of how the binding of Isaac is interpreted, whether metaphorically or literally, I fail to see how the interpretation lends any credence to Theo's Christianity being accurate or Bill's interpretation being flawed. Sure, Theo may find it a powerful narrative and deeply meaningful, but it reads like a nightmare when read literally. Perhaps Theo can enlighten us all on why any one interpretation is more convincing, more reasonable, or Bill's interpretation being flawed. Well, then you didn't listen to the video. Here, I'll make it simple. Where in the whole story does it say that Abraham was thinking? Where does it depict his motivations? Where does it depict what Isaac was thinking? His motivation, made up in the biblical literalist sense. Again, Mr. Miss is accusing me of being a biblical literalist because I told him that hell exists or doesn't. So Christians cannot interpret its existence for themselves. I informed him that this means the texts of Christianity are to be taken literally. He told me that not all Christians take the Bible literally because the practice of biblical literalism has only been around for like 100 years. He informed me to stop claiming that all Christians must then be biblical literalists. Also, can you give me a single example of someone saying something that literally cannot be interpreted multiple ways? Yeah, zebras exist. I like to see your interpretation that their buses gain traction. It is not uncommon for people who want to seem cleverer than they really are to support untenable and unintelligent positions either. You are forced to construct sentences to support this absurd position that Theo has. He asserts that God exists and he is a Roman Catholic. No intellectual reason ever given, except it is nuanced and can be interpreted many ways. Noticing the bleeding, obvious pink elephant in the room is not your strong suit, but maybe you are still working out if a bus is a car. Theo has done a very poor job of enlightening Billsy, if that is his intention. My father was brought up Christian and took much interest in understanding the narrative in the Bible. He still uses metaphors and stories from those teachings and loves hymns, etc. It is not hard to explain that one can be scientifically minded, educated, and appreciate the narrative in the Bible, and taking different meanings away from it. He no longer believes in God, but does hold some interesting metaphysical beliefs. Biglundi quoting Midas 41. Theo has done a very poor job of enlightening Billsy. End quote. Well, that's because Biglundi refuses to listen. Do you not recall him literally saying that he doesn't consider himself wrong? And after getting thrashed in Blog TV, he came to the conclusion that CV half gets it. He starts from the position that he's right and everyone else just has to work really hard to understand why. Quoting Mr. Miss, after getting thrashed in Blog TV, end quote. CardinalVirtues asked me to Blog TV with him because after they started a war with us, I informed them all that I was going to utterly destroy them. CardinalVirtues told me to come do it on Blog TV. After the debate, CardinalVirtues laughed at me and said, I thought you were going to destroy me. I told him I have, you just don't see it. He informed me that I'm going to be sorely disappointed when everything from this debate finally sinks into my thick skull. About 5 days later, CardinalVirtues shut his channel down, never to be heard from again. Biglundi should have waited that few days before posting his above comment. All versions of Christianity have come into being by the ideas spreading and mutating. Why do any of them believe that the meme they hold to is the right one? Yusuf al-Tahir says his religion is earliest and therefore accurate, but logically it spread from previous beliefs. Billsy's argument is not hard to follow. How can one claim that the narrative they hold is the right one? It is not about one being moderate or fundamentalist. It is about whether Christianity, in all or any of its mutated forms, can be shown to be true. This nuanced stuff Theo goes on with is a red herring, and I think the condescending tone used to Billsy is really mean. Biglundi quoting Midas 41, and I think the condescending tone used to Billsy is really mean. End quote. Are we talking about the same Billsy that declared through several videos that Theo was a Nazi? Note. When I asked Theowarner why he worshipped a god, practices a religion that advocates genocide, and requires him to carry said out if ordered to, Theowarner's response was that, my god's epistemology is too above me to fathom. In essence, I am just following orders. This prompted me to tell Theowarner what he is, a blind, obedient, genocidal, maniacal Nazi. Deceptive soul. How can you call it a truth claim if it has not been proven? Where does the truth of the matter come from? From evaluations of logic. Midas 41. Well, I disagree. I think it's absurd to make truth claims about what God desires without proof of his existence in the first place. Just because a lot of people do it doesn't make it less absurd. Ronnie Store. Metaphysical truth, translation, making shit up. I read on your channel description that you like to play the sheriff in Philosophy Town. You're not showing it here. In my debate with CardinalVirtues, I told him that if someone came to me with a description of a god, Christian or otherwise, and I knew there existed a contradictory description, I would bring up the contrary description to enlighten them to the fact that both cannot exist simultaneously. CardinalVirtues responded, if someone came to you with a description of God, you wouldn't tell them that no evidence of a God exists? I told him no, they can just retort, it does. He replied, so what? I told him that they can then just start making shit up. I told CardinalVirtues that you must destroy the theist's ability to make shit up, that every denomination is the result of a new Christian making up some new shit. He replied, well, they would make it up for you because they find you so unreasonable, which you are. Biglundi quoting Ronnie Store, making shit up, end quote. Yeah, you seem to be a logical positivist, aren't you? You are aware people abandoned that shit 50 years ago, right? You're like a creationist, getting science wrong in the eyes of anyone who understands philosophy. Now you're making shit up yourself. Where did I dismiss philosophy or state any incorrect philosophy? Thanks for proving my sheriff analogy. Dismiss metaphysical truth because it's a term used just like quantum physics by New Age quacks. So if 10 believers interpret a story in the Old Testament in 10 different and opposing ways, they all have their own metaphysical truth, right? Oh, regarding the sheriff, you managed to show your embarrassing arrogance and confusion in 3 lines of text. Biglundi quoting Ronnie Store. Where did I dismiss philosophy? End quote. When I mentioned metaphysical truth claims and you translated that to mean making shit up, pretty simple. You're rejecting metaphysics, a core branch of philosophy. Biglundi quoting Ronnie Store. They all have their own metaphysical truth? End quote. No, they all have different metaphysical claims. You really need to stop talking about things you know nothing about. Holy crap. We are talking about religion. Metaphysics is a very wide field. You may include gods, but then it turns into making shit up. I don't care if you don't like that, but philosophy needs to stay in the real world. You really should stop being a smart-ass kid. Let's move on to the video. Theowarner and Biglundi are Bible literalists. Biglundi, questioning a statement of mine. If God existed, interpretations of him wouldn't. End question. Since I have an interpretation of your argument you don't agree with, then your argument doesn't exist. Ha ha. Keep digging. I told Mr. Miss, literally, it has to be over 100 times, that if this God exists, then it created a place called hell, or it didn't. Thus, humans cannot subjectify hell's existence. I told Mr. Miss that Christians claim the Bible as their evidence of their God's existence. So, if it is evidence, then we would know this God exists. It would be impossible for us not to know it exists if the Bible were evidence of its existence. I told Mr. Miss that the God itself asserts that it is omniscient and omnipotent, and the Bible that the Christians claim is the evidence the God sent to them to prove to them it exists. Some Christians, when going by their own professed evidence, came away from it claiming hell exists, and some that it does not. I told Mr. Miss that it is impossible that an omniscient and omnipotent being cannot get across to Christians or anything else what it wants, because it can do anything, and anything it wants would be, in this case, wanting you to know if hell exists. This leads to only one empirical truth. If a God existed, human interpretations of it wouldn't. So here again, Mr. Miss fails at analogy, because he doesn't know what an analogy is, and therefore how to apply one. I will rephrase your non-analogy for you, Mr. Miss, in the hopes that you'll never attempt another one in your life. I'm helping you out here, so never try another one. Protect the world from you. Quoting Mr. Miss, since I have an interpretation of your argument you don't agree with, then your argument doesn't exist, end quote. Should read, since I have an interpretation of your argument you don't agree with, then you don't exist. Beelzebub. Also, how the hell does it follow that God might not give a shit if people know he exists or not goes to God wants the Jews only to know he exists and everyone else is to fuck off? This is an invention by Mr. Miss pulled out his holistic vegan ass. Those words never crossed my lips. After telling Mr. Miss that humans can't interpret Christianity, they have to take it literally, and that means that the existence of multiple denominations renders all Christianity to be made up, because each denomination is a new Christian making up something new. Mr. Miss informed me that Christians are not making it up, and don't have to be biblical literalists, and can interpret Christianity because God might not give a shit if people know he exists or not. Paraphrasing Mr. Miss from here, God could have told only a few people. I told Mr. Miss that would be the Jews, as Jesus stated he was not sent for the pigs, the Gentiles. Unbeknownst to this illegitimate, he has just asserted that interpreting Christianity is an invalid practice because he suggests that God only sent Christianity to a few. I informed him of his flub in this very video. His above is his response to that information. Busy, you need to learn what logic is, buddy. Also, you brought up hell like it's something all Christians believe in, which is another hilarious retardation from you. And then you add Calvinism into the mix. Busy, I don't even think you know what you're arguing. Again, you prove you are a moron, as you did not understand a thing in this video. You already fucked up in your first sentence. I said that perhaps this guy doesn't care if anyone knows he exists, including the ones who think they're talking to him. And besides that, it doesn't logically follow that just because God may have revealed himself to some people means that there can't be interpretation. What you fail to ever realize in any video you ever make is that there's no such thing as no interpretation of anything, including things you agree with me exists. Yeah, it does, but since you don't understand anything, I won't waste my time explaining it to you for the zillionth time. You haven't successfully explained it once. It doesn't logically follow, Billsy. I know it makes you feel bad, but you have to admit that you might not know what you're talking about here. Just admit it. Nobody will look down on you for it. No one will find you pathetic for saying, you know what, you're right, this argument is kind of silly. Keep digging the grave of your intelligence. Billsy, I have to ask you, is it not possible that someone can totally understand your argument and find it incorrect, and you might actually be incorrect? Are these just impossible to you? I know for a fact you do not understand my argument. Every new video you put out against me just seems to steer you further and further into the abyss of madness as you struggle to keep your pet argument and never admit that you might be wrong about Christianity and how logic works. It's sad, really. Unless you want to set up another Skype debate, I don't think I'll be responding to you again, Billy. You're so not worth my video making time. And me quoting Mr. Miss, never admit that you might be wrong about Christianity and how logic works, end quote. Logic and Christianity like you don't go together. If I'm wrong, all you have to do is prove it. Claiming biblical literalism as your rebuttal ain't doing it, fool. I told Mr. Miss, Theowarner, CardinalVirtues, and their gang that one denomination cannot claim there is a hell whilst another asserts there is not, and be said to be talking about the same thing. I told them that dictates that people cannot interpret the text of Christianity. I told them that if Christianity is true, that there would exist only one single understanding of hell in all Christian minds. That means that the texts of Christianity are to be taken literally, verbatim. Hell literally exists or it doesn't. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. It was then that this bunch told me that I was a biblical literalist, to stop saying that all Christians have to believe the exact same thing about hell, because not all Christians are biblical literalists. From that point on, they have been asserting that my argument is wrong because I am a biblical literalist, and biblical literalism has only existed for like 100 years or so, and to stop calling Christians biblical literalists just because you are one. Back to Mr. Miss. Claiming biblical literalism ain't cutting it, fool. Plus, I never claimed biblical literalism, you fool. You're just stretching and trying too hard to make an argument that's not even there. Yeah, you did, you're just too simple to know it. Biglundi quoting me. You're just too simple to know it? End quote. I'm better educated than you on this subject, but whatever. Biglundi quoting me. Keep digging your grave of intelligence? End quote. How sad, Billsy. You're not even trying to defend yourself anymore. Is that the best you've got? A vague threat that you seem to know something I don't and I'm making myself look stupid? Let me let you in on a secret, Billsy. Pretty much every educated person on YouTube thinks you're a joke. So who's in the intellectual grave? Keep living in denial, my friend. I'm better educated than you on this subject, but whatever. You certainly proved that wrong. You're not even trying to defend yourself anymore. Defend against what? You haven't anything that requires a defense. I've yet to have to defend against you. Only point out your stupidity. Pretty much every educated person on YouTube thinks you're a joke, or those be your intellectual equals, and my betters. But usually I include those who are educated, as in they've studied logic and have come to the conclusion that you're being an idiot. Mr. Misquoting me. I've yet to defend against you. End quote. So what was our Skype thing? You know, where you admitted you were wrong or didn't understand several points, and now understand them thanks to my explanation? No, just gonna ignore that? You're as big a liar as Theo, I see. The definition of superstition has nothing to do with my argument, Einstein Jr. Superstition is the point of my channel. Guess as usual you missed that too, fucking fool. Quoting Mr. Miss. Where you admitted that you were wrong or didn't understand several points, and now understood them thanks to my explanations. End quote. Never happened, dear listener, reader. But I just have to tell you what he's talking about. I told Mr. Miss that superstition is bad. Mr. Miss asked why. I told Mr. Miss because it is false. Mr. Miss asked how does that make it bad. I told Mr. Miss because a false thing is a bad answer to any question. Mr. Miss then informs us that that would make anime, pranks, white lies, and fiction bad too, because they are false. I told Mr. Miss that anime, pranks, white lies, and fiction are not answers to a question. Mr. Miss said they are, so you need to come up with a reason superstition is bad that does not include all those things, or you're just creating a tautology of superstition is bad because it is bad. I told Mr. Miss I would add more to my reason as to relieve his confusion, and Mr. Miss took this to mean I was agreeing with him that my reason was wrong. I know I wasn't, Mr. Miss. It seems to me that you love to change the subject whenever you get cornered, and resort to name calling and claiming that people are just missing something. I really love CV's video explaining what you were doing here. Presume my argument is way more intelligent than it sounds, and if it sounds dumb, then presume you don't get it. And if someone else comes along with a better argument supporting me, then that was my argument. CV would be CardinalVirtues, a piece of awful we forced to close this channel out of sheer shame for the things it spewed. If that's the case, then go debunk their arguments. Oh, that's right. Everyone that agrees with you is right, you hypocritical piece of shit. How am I being hypocritical? Because the people who agree with me think you're retarded and I agree with them? You suggest I'm wrong, along with them. Your interpretations of my argument is as noteworthy to me as your Christianity ones, boy. By the way, if CV is so correct, how about you send him here? CV is more annoyed with you than I am. Also, he made a video about it. If you have a problem, go watch his video and address it. Annoyed? You fucking clown. Christianity doesn't annoy you, you complete animal. No, Christianity doesn't annoy me, you complete bigot. You see, Mr. Miss, this Christian God you are sympathetic toward, racist monstrosity that murdered everyone on the planet save the Jews in what they like to call the Great Flood. We unsympathetic, normal, ethical people call that genocide. This God you protect ordered that anyone that engages in homosexual sex be murdered. We normals call that gay killing. You coddle a God that put to death the firstborn of Egypt. We are the sane bent call that baby murder. You kiss the ass of a God that had a homeowner who was being visited by a friend. Send a prostitute the friend had brought along with him out to be raped to death by a mob that had come to rape his friend to death. After she was raped to death, the visiting friend dismembered her body and concealed the parts in different places. The moral? Raping men to death, bad. Raping women to death, good. And be sure to conceal the body, because if you don't, you'll have to pay her father some silver, or you'll have to marry her. But if you're lucky and can convince the tribe she liked it, then you can all stone her to death. We normals call that raping worse. The Christians to whom you sympathize call it satisfyingly sweet, and net to it in their dreams, sleep and awake. And you count yourself among them. You are one of them. You are them, you complete savage. No, Christianity doesn't annoy me, you complete bigot. Some Christians do, but Christianity does not. It annoys you though, since, well, you're a bigot. And for some strange reason, you cannot coexist with someone who disagrees with you about something. This is Biglundi picking up Theowarner's argument. After I asked Theowarner how he can worship a monster that he must murder his own child for, he told me his God has reasons for ordering such a thing that he could never imagine, so he will do it. I told him he was no better than a Nazi spewing the adage, I was only following orders. Theowarner then asked me, what? Are we not supposed to follow any orders? For Theowarner, in order to murder his own child is no more noteworthy, no more significant than in order to tie his own shoe. And that pledge is all that Mr. Miss supports and rationalizes above. You, Mr. Miss, along with Theowarner, are the dregs of a society, a blight in sapient form, a cancer on the human organ. Me quoting Biglundi. But Christianity does not. It annoys you though, since, well, you're a bigot. End quote. And you're a sympathizer of rapists, gay killers, and child murderers, which proves you are a savage, pure and simple. Nope, and you can't prove it. No, Christianity doesn't annoy me. You already have. Snake Plisskeness. I patiently tried to explain to Lundy why he's a self-important idiot. Okay, I wasn't all that patient. We are who we are. I made a video titled, Jesus and the Golden Rule Suck. Mr. Miss made a response video to me called, What the fuck is this? I don't even... In my video, I discussed Jesus' statement, Therefore, all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. Or what many refer to as Jesus' golden rule. I informed people it sucked because it simply states that if you want a woman to have sex with you, you can go and have sex with her regardless of her wishes. If you wish to be tortured and murdered, you can go and torture and murder. That boy Mr. Miss made his response. You have to see it to believe it. Wow. You can go to his channel to watch it if he hasn't taken it down by the time you see this. Enjoy these comments from the page his video appeared. Note, it should be stated that by the time my response to this video came out, Mr. Miss had abandoned his own bestest, Theowarner, like all the rest of Theowarner's clan. Why? Because I'd proven Theowarner to be a lying, insipid, child-murdering Nazi. Gambler. Your reactions are prize. I have been debating the issue of the existence of his God with Gambler for quite some time. He is Eastern Orthodox Christian. He informed me that there is no judgment in Christianity, no hell. I asked him why some Christians say there is then. His response was that they are heretics. I told him that that can't be the case, that hell either exists or does not by decree of his God. Christians don't get to decide for themselves. He told me they do. I told him that this dictates his God doesn't exist because the Christians are informing the God of what it did or didn't do instead of the other way around. He told me I was now a waste of his time. I told him, fuck you too, bitch. Mr. Miss goes. Someone caught screen caps of my reactions and wants to make them into memes, actually. There's me in mid-boisterous laughter, me confused as hell, and me creepily amused at what I'm watching. You really need to watch Mr. Miss's video to get the full scope of its hilarity, of what he and Gambler are referring to. Mr. Miss stating, me creepily amused. Mr. Miss told me to put a bullet in my brain where one belongs, sending me to the ground where I belong. When I offered to give Mr. Miss my address so that he could carry that murder out instead of passing the buck, he shirked his duty. You are beyond creepy, Mr. Miss. You are a cowardly, degenerate, murderous savage. I seriously can't even formulate a serious response. How could you stomach a back and forth with this person? I'd have just walked away from the, differently abled person. This thing is referred to as Abnormal One. It would often come to my channel and attempt to think. What it thinks thinking is to insult. For a time, it would come to my channel to do just that. I love putting this stupid bitch in its place. It finally got the clue to stop attempting its non-thought process on my channel, and it now comes to other inepts channels to not think about me with them. Arsene Lupin 123. You read the Bible 3 times? I commend you. I could hardly make it to the end of Kings 2. Kings, Numbers, and a couple other books are pretty dry and morally abhorrent reads. But that's what you do when you grow up in a fundamentalist home. Want to know how this whole thing got started between me and Mr. Miss? I'll tell you. I was debating a character named Theowarner. I made the statement that if Theowarner, who claims Catholicism, would not murder his own child at the order of his God, as the moral of the Abraham and Isaac story decrees, then he is not a Christian. He is not practicing Christianity. For Christianity dictates that you must adhere to any order the creator of Christianity states, without question or remorse. Theowarner agreed with me. His response was that even though there are morally repugnant orders in his religion, that he doesn't have to acknowledge them, that he, Christians, can pick and choose what they will adhere to in Christianity, that is their right and that just because you will not adhere to a specific order does not mean that you find that order abhorrent. Mr. Miss, Theowarner's bestest buddy, came to my channel, called me a bigot, a liar, and called for my death because Mr. Miss believed, for some inexplicable reason, that I had stated that Theowarner Christians would murder their own children if ordered to by their God. In multiple written comments and then in a Skype debate, I explained to Mr. Miss what I actually said, yet he continued to call me a bigot, liar, and call for my death, murder. So, what it actually means to grow up in a fundamentalist home is that you cannot escape the stupid. Sea Beach. I would think that Hitchens, and in fact I believe he did, would first say that the Golden Rule was around before Christ. Confucius stated it about over 400 years before Jesus. The fact that he can't even understand the basic premise of a concept that a 5-year-old can grasp is scary. The doofus has spoken. Let's see. If you want a chick to rape you, rape her. Is that about the premise, you demonic genital hair? Oh, you didn't know that was the premise that a 5-year-old can get? Or what does that make you? An opportune abortion, miss. Abracadabra logic. Wait, does Beasley actually think that Rob, Theo, and you are proponents of divine command theory? Is he so ignorant of the world around him that he can't comprehend you three enough to understand what theologies you would prescribe to if you and Rob had even prescribed to any Christian dogma? And wait, after having lengthy Skype conversations with the two of you, he thinks that either you or Rob actually hold on to any tenets of Christianity to begin with? How can anybody be this stupid? Well, considering everything you just wrote, I can't be as stupid as you. To be fair, he says in the beginning that any likenesses are purely coincidental. He just wants to use insubstantial caricatures of us in order to make his shit arguments. He probably doesn't think Rob and I are Christian, but he clearly has nothing left if he just needs to draw us and make up arguments that are rarely if ever used, and then make us say them with his voice. He's pretty much proved the only thing he's equipped to debate is a sock puppet. Insubstantial caricatures of you. I never said you have substance, because I know you don't. Arguments that are rarely if ever used, meaning they are used. So what's your point, insipid garbage? Sock puppet? Then I'm in the right place. Yes, although that was quite obviously a vapid disclaimer so that this video could exist without somebody calling bullshit around 30 seconds in. And you're probably right that he doesn't actually believe that you are theists. Just sad that he's apparently so obsessed with you that instead of even using caricatures of actual theists, he randomly tosses you caricatures of you three into a video where you clearly don't belong in order to defend a position none of you hold. Calling bullshit 30 seconds in. Is that what you're calling it, fool? You could never in life ever demonstrate that assertion, so fuck you, ignoramus. Don't belong? Theowarner told me that he would murder his own child if his God ordered him to, as the Abraham and Isaac story dictates. Biglundi told me that the Christians are not making up Christianity, that the concept of the Holy Spirit is true because that is what led them to it. CardinalVirtues told me that the fact that some Christians believe hell exists and some believe it does not proves that Christianity is a valid concept. Therefore, Christianity is open to interpretation and true. Fuck you, abracadabra logic, inbred hillbilly. Mr. Misquoting me. If this God exists, this world, reality as we know it would not be the case. End quote. You don't know that. So that's an unfalsifiable, really very religious statement. Then I will explain this to you again for the umpteenth time, Mr. Miss. The argument from a disconnect to reality or the supernatural doesn't exist. Perhaps you have heard a Jew, Christian, Muslim make the proclamation that with God anything is possible. We must test this assertion using the scientific method to determine if indeed the existence of God is possible. What are the properties of the existence we inhabit at this very moment? We arrive at three possible choices. 1, a place where nothing can happen. 2, a place where only some things can happen. And 3, a place where anything can happen. Tests 1 through 2. Use your hand to pick something up. You have just determined that you do not dwell in an existence where nothing is possible, as well as having determined that you, at minimum, live in an existence where some things are possible, because you just picked something up. Test 3. Our test will be the ability to teleport to the Red Sea and, as Moses did, part it, divide it in two with a wave of your hand. Take the time now to teleport yourself to the Red Sea and part it with a wave of your hand. You will discover that you cannot, and you have concurrently discovered that you do not inhabit an existence where anything is possible. If you inhabit an existence where some things are possible, picking up a pencil, if something you cannot accomplish in that existence, parting the Red Sea with a wave of your hand, becomes possible, then the existence you inhabit is an existence where anything is possible. But as our Red Sea test has confirmed, we do not live in an existence where anything is possible. And that would be the existence we inhabit if there were a creature that could part the Red Sea with a wave of its hand. If anything were possible, anyone or anything, grass, chairs, leprechauns, lions, or fingernail, could teleport itself to the Red Sea and part it with a wave of its hand. if it so desired. For a supernatural creature that can part the Red Sea on a whim to exist, the feasibility for a creature that can part the Red Sea on a whim must exist for a creature to be able to come into existence that can part the Red Sea on a whim. The supernatural must exist independently of the creature. The creature, after it has come into existence, cannot invent the supernatural. Reality, the very fabric of existence itself, must be conducive to such feats. If this God exists, this world, reality as we know it, would not be the case. And the scientific test you just attempted, parting the Red Sea, confirms it is not possible. This dictates that it is impossible for a creature that can accomplish the impossible, supernatural feats, to exist. No gods, deist or otherwise. This also confirms that the reality you are able to measure, note, observe, the natural world, does exist, and is the only existence there is, as we have demonstrated that the supernatural world does not exist. Now that I have relieved you of your absurd superstition that existence is unfalsifiable, you can never say I've never helped you out. Next up, Theowarner, all the above, with commentary. Biglundi quoting me. If this God exists, this world reality as we know it would not be the case. End quote. You don't know that, so that's an unfalsifiable, really very religious statement. You keep saying you're providing one argument that people aren't getting, but you've provided at least 4 to 5 in this one alone. And you keep asserting you know what reality would be like if this God existed, but the fact of the matter is, no you don't. Keep digging. Biglundi quoting me. If there were evidence of this God, man would know this God exists. End quote. Well, if that's your argument, then your argument is one big non sequitur. There could be evidence we haven't discovered yet. Our epistemological discoveries might be going in the wrong direction. We might be viewing the evidence in the wrong light. There's so many problems with this argument. Mr. Misquoting me. If this God existed, interpretations of it would, end quote. Quantum physics exists, and it has multiple interpretations. So you're wrong. You're a moron. Pure and simple. Wonderful counter, I'm convinced. No, you're not. I didn't make a counter because you've never delivered a rebuttal to anything I've said. Why? You don't know anything I've said. I know exactly what you said. But the problem is every time someone demonstrates what you said to be stupid as hell, you say, that's not my position. Because you're silly. You haven't the brains of a tuna fish salad. Later, them bulb. In conclusion, if you, my dear readers and listeners, are interested, I'd like to leave you with this final gift. I was debating a YouTuber by the name of Theowarner. You have heard and or read my argument above. This Theowarner came to my channel and told me that my argument didn't disprove God, because it was simply a rehashing of an assertion called the argument from divine hiddenness. Theo's boy, Mr. Miss, jumped on that bandwagon. I told them both that it wasn't, but they persisted. Mr. Miss decided to prove to me it was in our Skype debate. Can you explain to me what you think the argument from divine hiddenness is? I informed Mr. Miss of my understanding of it. No. I mean, you're kind of right, but you left out a lot of shit. I'll go ahead and explain to you a little bit better. The argument from divine hiddenness means a God has a heaven and a hell. The criteria of which you go to them includes believing in him. This God, being benevolent, doesn't want you to go to hell. This God would then by default make his presence an inarguable fact. And because he has not done this, and there are arguments among Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus about this God, because this God is not clear, and a lot of people are going to go to hell because of that, then this God is either an asshole or he doesn't exist. Yes. Okay, so now you understand what it means. Yes. So, what you did was you read off a series of comments by some guy. Some guy would be my main man, my context, who said, I think I understand Billsy's argument. Actually, he attempted, as dozens of others did, to explain my argument to Theo and all of them in a way they could probably understand. And he pretty much outlined the argument from divine hiddenness. At this point, I interrupted Mr. Miss with, no. I then said, go ahead, I'm sorry. And then you said that is exactly what I meant. Yes. So what is the difference between, I know the difference between your argument and that argument. If you acknowledge that these two arguments are different, then they are not the same argument. So why does your bunch continue to insist they are? Well, why don't you tell me the differences you believe it is? Okay, the difference that I see between your argument and the argument from divine hiddenness is that confusion cannot happen if a God exists, because if this God did exist, then he would reveal himself in a way that there would be no need for interpretation. Note Mr. Mrs. Monumental, as Snake Plissken has put it, failure here. My argument states that if this God exists, interpretation would not, because we would know the God exists, because the Christian and all other religious claim their religious texts are evidence that this God exists. It would be the only God worshipped. Mr. Miss has taken my interpretation factoid and assigned it to his inept comparison, that because God does not want us to go to hell, it would reveal itself so that we would all avoid hell, and so interpretation wouldn't exist. Okay, and that's not the same thing. If it's the same thing, then why are you presenting it as its difference? My yes answer above, Mr. Miss, for your edification, is only referring to the fact that interpretation would not exist in either case. That's it, everyone. Take care.